Welcome, everyone, to another episode of A Sister and Her Mister. Today we have Jacqueline. She's a certified holistic nutritionist, wellness writer, and podcaster who is passionate about healing through integrative medicine. After struggling with her own health challenges, including PCOS, she turned to holistic healing and was able to put her symptoms into remission. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, and it was so fun having you guys on my show last week. So excited to sit in the opposite side.
I know we love your podcast, Well and Strong. We highly recommend it to our listeners. We'll definitely be linking it in the description as well. But thank you so much for joining us. And I wanted to first clarify one thing. I want to make sure I get your name right. Is it Jack? I've had so many Jacquelines in my life. It's Jacqueline.
You know what's funny is Talene actually pronounces that's the French way to pronounce it, Jacqueline, right? I'm not French. I pronounce it just the English way, Jacqueline. But my closest friends call me Jack, Jac. It started in college and then just kind of stuck. So that's kind of how I just signed myself off. There's like two people who call me Jackie, but I pretty much will, respond to Jack or Jacqueline.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, look at you, Ty, going with the French way.
I tend to do that.
I like the French way, so that works too.
Okay, good.
Doctor said you got PCOS. Now go on, girl, just lose some weight. Till I took the symptoms into my own hands and reversed them naturally.
Before we kick it off, tell us about what it was like when you were first diagnosed with PCOS. What symptoms were you experiencing? How did you feel about when you were diagnosed? Like, what was that all about?
Yeah, you guys have me going back now. It's funny because I don't really give too much thought to this part of my life because I feel like I never really had a clear diagnosis. But I want to say in high school, my cycle started to become pretty irregular. Obviously, that's common, right? Due to stress. And, when you're in your teenage years, it's, not unheard of. And then I want to say in college, sophomore year of college, was when I quote unquote got diagnosed. I actually went to an endocrinologist. We spoke about the Rotterdam criteria last week, found out I had two of those three things going on. And basically, I was told I should go on metformin, which is obviously one of the conventional approaches to PCOS, go on birth control. So I didn't know any better. I went on birth control for about 4 years, low estrogen fee, which I was told was a quote unquote low estrogen one, but it's still birth control, right? So I was on that for a few years. But I think through that time, I just recognized that this was just suppressing my symptoms, right? It wasn't addressing the root cause, and did a lot of reading and research on my own and realized that there was a better way. So got off of it when I was 24, 25 and just was able to reverse a lot of my symptoms as we discussed in our episode last week, which was really awesome. But in terms of symptoms, I would probably just say irregular cycles. Acne was always a big thing for me. Again, it was kind of masked because teenage years, right? Like acne is a common thing, so you don't really think too much about it. But aside from that, I just, sometimes fatigue, occasional fatigue. Although there are other factors at play there because I would eat a lot of gluten in high school and college, only to later find out I was gluten intolerant. I think there's a lot of issues at hand, but I mean, thankfully I didn't really have too many of the symptoms that many women suffer from, but nevertheless, it was really great to be able to get off of birth control and just, kind of be able to tackle it on my own.
Oh, yeah, totally. I think it's a very tough age to also have PCOS or not be sure if you have PCOS or not, because there are a lot of things happening around you. Like it's obviously you're a teenager. There's a lot of different hormones changing your body,
Right.
as well as there's like it's parties. There's studying for school. The stress of trying to make it
College.
to university, right? Like college.
Yeah.
There's all these crazy things happening, and also our diets are probably not the best because we're just like doing what we need to do. Go to 7-Eleven and get a. I used to get a cheeseburger, or hot dog. It's so disgusting now that I look back at it. It
The
was
things we
it,
do.
it was a hot dog made of a cheeseburger.
Are you serious?
Yes, it was a hot dog, and instead of like the hot dog inside, it was a burger meat with cheese filled inside.
Wow.
That's wild.
That was high school.
That's cool.
Someone put marshmallows on a hot dog. I think it was at a party last year at a friend's house, and I was like, "What are you doing?" But
What are we doing?
the things
Now
people
I want
do.
to try it. Maybe might go to it.
That is a step too far.
But through this experience, you were able to become, like where you become today, where you have your blog, your website, your social media, as well as your amazing podcast. Do you feel like obviously there's way more to your story than just like being diagnosed with PCOS, but do you feel it was being diagnosed with PCOS as well as other life experiences that led you to here today?
Yeah, no, 100%. I was sharing with you both before we hit record, that the reason I started Well and Strong was not necessarily from my own PCOS diagnosis, but more so with my mom's journey.
Hmm.
So my mom was diagnosed, and I don't think I actually shared this with you guys on last week's episode. So just new information for you.
Yeah.
My mom was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer in 2008. I was 13 years old, and that was really, you could call it like a catalyst that got me interested in the integrative medicine space. So I just, again, I'm a researcher at heart, started doing a lot of research at the age of 13 in terms of what other complementary therapies existed out there for people, with cancer.
Yeah.
And then in 2018, so my mom, had stage 2, had surgery, had a mastectomy. And then almost 10 years later, we found out it came back to stage
Oh,
4 and metastasized. So she's been dealing with that for almost 7 years now.
wow.
The crazy thing, it's I don't want to use the word funny, but how God works time-wise. So when I was in college, my background is in economics and finance, so completely unrelated to what I'm doing now. But as an undergraduate, I did this honors program, and we could basically write a thesis on any topic under the sun. So this
Mhm.
was a year before my mom's recurrence. What did I write about? I wrote about integrative medicine for cancer. So it was basically a 100-page paper where I just explored all of these different complementary therapy modalities. And it was wild because, again, a year later, we found out my mom's cancer returned. But
Yeah.
the beauty is that I was kind of already equipped with the knowledge of, okay, these are things that we could potentially try just from my own research, right?
Yes.
So then Well and Strong was born in 2020, again, just as a blog, didn't have a name in the space, zero connections, but just started writing about complementary therapies. And I used a lot of the content in my honors thesis as a foundation for that blog.
Mhm.
And then little by little, a bunch of integrative doctors just kind of got wind of it, started reaching out to me, asking if they could contribute. And at the time, I was blown away. I was like, this is wild. People want to contribute to my little WordPress site. Like I don't even have any followings on social media, but God touched it and it grew. And I kind of evolved, certainly like cancer has always been and will always be like key cornerstone content for me. It's my passion. But the topics evolved beyond that, right? To encompass things like hormone health and, discuss what I went through with PCOS and mindfulness and mental health and emotional health coming out of COVID and just the nature of society and anxiety and all these, worries we have today. Um, but it's been quite the journey. And I started my podcast. It'll be 2 years ago in May. So you guys
Mhm.
are both way ahead of me. I'm only at like episode 82.
Oh no, you're
But
doing amazing though.
2 years is a long time.
Yeah.
yeah, no, you guys are so sweet. I appreciate that. But yeah, it's been so fun just to be able to speak with people whom I've admired for so long in the health and wellness space and just use my podcast as an excuse to be like, hey, want to come talk to me for an hour about a really, fun topic and be on my show. And to connect with people like you guys, who I never would have met had it not been for Well and Strong. So
Mm-hmm.
it's been fun. It's been a ride.
Yeah. Speaking of cancer, one of the fears of a woman with PCOS is related to cancer because of the chronic inflammation. And if PCOS, an inflammatory condition, goes ignored for so long, different things can happen to different people. I'm not saying everyone will get cancer, but women with PCOS tend to gear towards getting type 2 diabetes, ovarian cancer, breast cancer, things like this are more prevalent later on if it's not addressed early on.
Mhm.
So what are some of the integrative approaches that you've talked about in your blog for women with PCOS, trying to avoid that and reducing their susceptibility to that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I wrote one of my first articles I ever wrote on Well and Strong was inflammation as the root of disease, right? And when I say that, I mean chronic inflammation, right? So these are things that have been kind of, burning in the body for quite some time, not acute situations. When I think of inflammation, the first thing I think at is someone's diet, right? I think food is medicine. I think that's where everyone should start. So I'm a really big, advocate, similar to what you both, you know, propose support is like eliminating gluten and dairy for 30 days, right? Or like eliminating inflammatory foods. I mentioned earlier, I found out I had a gluten intolerance after college, and that just cutting that out made such a difference in terms of just how I felt physically.
How did you find that out?
I did testing. I was tested for it. Again, I don't have celiac, and people are like, so like, what does gluten intolerance mean? It's obviously like it's not as extreme on the spectrum. But for me, I would notice that I would get like hives sometimes. I'd break out in hives if I ate gluten. The brain fog, you just something you don't feel quite right. So I think, go ahead.
Sorry, not to cut you off. You ate it your whole life. You kind of like silently suffered from symptoms. Then you took the test and realized that was the culprit.
One of them. Yeah.
Nice.
One of them. And then obviously, I did a lot more reading about dairy and how A1 can be inflammatory and how you should try to opt for A2 milk. And again, there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of experimenting. Everyone is different. And I think in the health space, and you guys have obviously seen this, is it's really easy to find something that works for you, right? And then all of a sudden say, everyone should be doing this.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone is different, right? We are all created differently. Our bodies, respond to things differently. So I think that you really do have to take an individual approach when it comes to things like, what to omit or include in your diet. But I will say gluten and dairy just across the board, as you both know, like pretty inflammatory for most folks. So start with the food that's on your plate. I'm a huge fan of spices. I don't know if you guys can see it. I have a massive spice rack on my kitchen counter.
Where do you get your spices from? Because like I did a lot of research when we move into our new place about getting spices and stuff.
Yeah, so I can't remember where that set is from, but I love Star West Botanicals and Mountain Rose Herbs. Folks have to be really, it's really important where you get your herbs from. Make sure everything's organic. I prefer things that are grown in the USA. But yeah, Star West, and I buy like bulk herbs. Like if I open my cabinets right now, you guys would be like, this girl. But I cook a lot with spices. So turmeric is a wonderful one, against inflammation. So just try and incorporate, those into my diet when I can. And then, you guys spoke about the benefits of, curcumin last week and supplementing with that. So I think there are things that, folks could supplement with too to help reduce inflammation. Omega-3 fish oil is great. I prefer, getting it from food. So I have a lot of salmon in my diet. I'm a big proponent of like a Mediterranean style diet, plant-based, rich in omega-3s. Again, talking about like personalization, I did a fun DNA test a while back, and it showed that I was extra sensitive to saturated fats. And I discovered that kind of reducing my red meat intake actually made me feel better. So I still eat meat. Protein's important, but I don't have as much as I used to have. And it's been fun to kind of monitor my blood work and even my hemoglobin A1C, and just kind of see like how things respond to eliminating different things. And or my hemoglobin, my ApoB, which actually was high for someone my age. So by reducing my saturated fat via my meat intake, I was able to drop that like 30 points. I'm going on a tangent, but I would just say food is medicine. Start with what's on your plate. Supplement certainly if you need additional support there. But just, continue to go by just symptoms, how you feel, assessing your CRP levels and your blood work is always helpful. But it's just the basics. And then stress, right? Like,
I know.
We're just talking about this. Stress is huge. I mean, you could be doing all the right things, but, mentally you're working all the time and you're not creating time to just spend with your friends or your family or decompress. And, that's going to show up somewhere in your body, and it could show up as inflammation. So it's really about a holistic approach.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, definitely stress is a big one, because it's like it puts your mind state in the wrong place, even if like life isn't as bad. Not that like, not even just like PCOS, but in general, like you could be having just like a normal life, but if you're constantly stressed, you're constantly thinking about what the worst thing can happen is, you're constantly just worried and puts yourself in a bad situation. I wanted to ask about your DNA test. Did you find out anything that was like interesting or funny, like you didn't know before? Because I did one of those too, and I found like a lot of stuff.
I found out I have, well, aside from the fact that my ApoB was really high, Interestingly, it said that my body was like built as an Olympic athlete, which I don't really know if I trust that because I don't think that's the case. But it was interesting because it showed like what you're most likely to like respond to. So for me, it said like I respond best to like high intensity interval training, which I feel like most people do anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the ApoB is probably like the most surprising and enlightening. And here's the thing with those tests too, like I think there's a time and place, and I think it depends upon the person who takes it, right? Because if you could look at that information and say, okay, like this is helpful to know and helping me like craft my diet or my lifestyle, that's fine. But if you take it to the extreme and it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to get all these things because of all these like variants that show up on the test, like that's also not healthy, right? And we know that like epigenetics is a real thing.
Totally.
So, Sirak, what did yours say?
I got like an elite power athlete, kind of similar to what you got about the Olympic athlete. I got elite
Why
power
aren't we in
athlete.
the Olympics?
Yeah, and I haven't like lived that day down since. You know, I basically bring it up in any conversation.
You know why? Because it's true. Because you're like super athletic.
And there's like a lot of like weird things, like like you can smell the asparagus in your pee when like things like that. Like really random stuff was in there. And like you're more likely to have a little patch of hair on the top of your back, which I do. I don't have like a hairy back. I just have a little patch of hair like right here.
You should check out Wild Health. That's the one I did.
Oh, is it? Okay. I did Ancestry, I think. Yeah, Ancestry.
Yeah.
Like
Ancestry,
those
yeah.
ones. Yeah. Not
no. Yeah. This was slightly different. Wild Health is more of like you should check it out. It's really interesting. Andrew Dawson co-founded it. He was on my podcast not too long ago, but it's just it's really cool.
The only problem is like now the internet has my DNA. Like they can clone me if they want to, which is like now, you know, it is what it is. If I die, I'm gone. But like one day they're gonna clone me 100%. I'm serious. The CEO of Ancestry is, I think, together with the CEO of Google. So right there,
you have your proof.
Anyway, back to the podcast.
Back to the podcast. So you mentioned a bunch of different things that help with reducing inflammation. It's all preventative wellness. One of the things you mentioned was checking your CRP levels. And I feel like this is a really important one that I don't want to brush over. So I just wanted to go back to that. I personally had my CRP levels tested when I was first diagnosed with PCOS. And I remember that my doctor was like, yeah, you have a lot of inflammation, but kind of just like brushed over it. Then I saw a dietitian and she was like, yeah, it could just be that like whatever, you were like feeling sick that day or something. She just like brushed over it too. Mm-hmm. And, you know, later on when I cut out gluten and dairy and it went down, I realized like that was a huge signal that I had chronic inflammation. And it's not a test that everyone gets done for some reason. It's like you have to ask for it or something. Is this something that you asked for? Did you work with a naturopathic doctor? Like, how did that go down for you? And where can people get it done?
Yeah, no, so thankfully, and again, I think this is just like the nature of how like even conventionally trained doctors are kind of evolving as they are more open to doing these blood tests that otherwise, you know, were not typically part of quote unquote routine blood work. So for me, actually, I think my CRP was included as just routine testing as part of my last physical. But, you know, certainly like we were just talking before about, you know, doing like DNA testing. I mean, there's companies like Wild Health that will do CRP testing. LabCorp On Demand is actually amazing. I don't know if you guys have heard, but they have like a whole like on demand section now where you basically could order a series of blood tests, like whatever you want. It could be packages, like hormone testing packages. It could be like ad hoc, one-off, like I just want to test my CRP levels, and you just buy it on LabCorp ondemand.com. You just go to your nearest facility and they'll do it for you, and you get your results right there. So it's awesome that you can kind of like bypass, you know, having to go to a doctor to get a prescription.
I'm glad you said that, because so many people struggle with begging their doctors for lab tests, and their doctors refuse to do them. And I just don't understand why anyone would use it. Like, just
it's pretty
wild. Lab test. It's not a big deal.
And I will say, for people who like are considering doing that test, they always say, and I was like, this doesn't make sense, but now I'm like, no, it does, because I've seen it happen. Avoid intense exercise 24 hours before testing your CRP levels, right? Because that obviously will raise them. Things like sauna use, right? So just kind of like have an easier day the day before you're planning to get those levels tested. But Yeah, I mean, thankfully it's
Interesting.
something that's more part of routine blood work, so that's encouraging.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, for sure. And earlier, you had mentioned about like faith and mindset in terms of like obviously dealing with, complex situations, PCOS, your mom's cancer, and other, situations happening. We haven't talked so much about faith on this podcast, but we do always talk about like mindset and essentially, either meditating or doing therapy or doing the right things for the mind to help make sure that the person is not discouraged in their PCOS journey. Could you kind of like help people who maybe new to that kind of mindset, or maybe people who are faithful but they haven't used that in their journey? Could you maybe explain to them how they can do that and help themselves feel better from the inside within?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love this question, and I'm very open to in my journey and sharing that I'm Christian, and my faith has been a huge part of my journey, even just not only with my mom, but in building well and strong. And I found that over the years, I've realized that you know we are to do what we can do here, right? Like we are to be stewards of our bodies. But at the end of the day, I don't think we should idolize our health, right? And for me, at least, I've realized that I used to put so much of my hope in the treatment, even for my mom, right? It was like the next best thing, like this is what's going to, fix the issue. And I've realized, especially over the past year, that it's not so much about the treatment as it is in trusting God with the outcome of whatever that treatment is.
Mhm.
And I think it just takes a lot of pressure off of yourself, right? So if anyone's listening right now that is going through either like a very serious diagnosis or something, not as significant, I think there's a lot of decision fatigue and anxiety around, these paths that we think, I have to make the right decision.
Mhm.
But again, at the end of the day, with my faith, I just emphasize the fact that we are not as in control as we think we are. Right. So you have to make the best decision you can, at the time with the information you have and just go from there. But with that said, I love just meditating on scripture. That's been
Mhm.
huge for me. In fact, my aunt sent me one of Dr. Axe's podcast episodes from this morning, and it just highlighted the fact that like prayer actually changes the brain. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Caroline Leaf's work. She's a Christian neuroscientist. She is brilliant, but she just has done a lot of research on literally how like just 10, 15 minutes of prayer um, has so much impact that it actually like shows changes on a brain scan on an MRI within 8 weeks of again
Yeah.
just like 10 to 15 minutes of daily prayer. So I think be it prayer, be it just sitting in a quiet space, listening to the ocean waves, meditating on a verse, meditating on something that's encouraging is so, so important, not only for reducing inflammation in the body, but also just rewiring your brain, right? And this is a
Mhm.
whole other, topic we could go down, but like intrusive thoughts are a very real thing. Anxiety is a very real thing. And there also is so much science around the fact that like the thoughts we have elicit physical responses in our bodies,
Mhm.
right? So if you have a scary thought or a thought of fear, your body, like your cortisol level is going to go up, right? Like you're going to activate
Mhm.
your sympathetic system. So it's like, what are things that we can actively do to activate our parasympathetic systems, right? Which is our rest and digest system, to really bring those cortisol levels down, bring that inflammation down, let our bodies know we're going to be safe. So prayer for me is a huge one. I like apps. There's a great app like Abide. Someone else mentioned another one, but yeah, I mean, you have to find what works for you, but just 10 or 15 minutes a day. And it sounds like it's so long, but it's really not. And if you could
No,
just be
yeah.
like structured in it and you actually like start to see the benefits, you're going to be like, why have I not been doing this my entire life?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, 10 to 15 minutes of a day is nothing when you consider everything we do throughout the day, like how much
Mhm.
time we
yeah,
sometimes on like
on social
on our
media.
phone.
On the social
Yeah,
media.
social media, exactly.
Same.
Seriously.
No, I totally agree
Yeah.
with you, and I
Yeah.
could totally see how that has such an impact because whether it's faith, like religious faith, or whether it's faith in yourself, or whether it's just using a different meditation app like that, all of that is essentially doing the same thing, which is like you're thinking more positively, you're thinking more about like the future and how the good things can come. You're looking at the bigger picture, a bigger power to help you overcome these things. So the power of our brains is huge. Like when we work out or when we do something really difficult, like how our brain perceives it really changes like how we tackle it. So I agree that can definitely have a huge impact.
I recently saw a video about on Instagram, of course, about how
Where else?
how prayer, like you said, does change your brain and like hippocampus, and then it also like shifts your body into relaxing and like
Mhm.
it stimulates your parasympathetic system,
Yeah.
and it like there's like actual research studies showing like the physiological effects of prayer and of course of meditation and of anything that is going to relax you for 15 minutes, but it's
Yeah.
really like for some reason so difficult to carve out those 15 minutes,
I know.
you know.
Yeah.
Do you know what's wild too, you guys? And I'm sure like you've obviously observed this just, the past few years of being in the space, but I feel like there are always these things, there's constantly new things coming out, right? About biohacking and all these tools
Mhm.
and supplements for longevity and do this and do that. But like at the end of the day, the things that are the most effective are the things that have always been foundational and that are often free, right? And
Mhm.
it's like I feel like some folks have to be able, like, how do I say this? They have to see the science, right? To know that morning sunlight is good for you when like
Yeah.
we have known this for like hundreds and hundreds of
I
years.
know.
Yeah.
And it's not the next supplement that's like going to be your magic bullet. It's really
Oh
the
yeah.
foundational things that, you guys talk about too for a holistic approach to PCOS. And I feel like if
Yeah.
people could just change like 3 foundational things about their lives, like one of which is, prayer and meditation daily, like that in itself is huge, like
Totally.
100%. Like all those extra things are complementary of the foundational things, like you said. Like, are you exercising correctly? Is your diet and lifestyle, in a general 80-20 in a good way? Those are the foundational. Like mentally, are you doing good practices? If those 3 foundational things are hitting, then if you were to add like those supplements or those like you said, like I'm
right.
sure you've heard like Brian Johnson, right? Like the guy, the don't die philosophy, which to a certain we like the guy. We love Brian Johnson. We think he's cool. Like the overall achievement of like trying to do the
Longevity.
overall science to really find out what's the best stuff for longevity. But it's not like a life that we would ever live or recommend to anybody because it's so strict and like it's not doable for
Yeah. I mean,
99% of people.
you have to be passionate about what you're doing. He's passionate about what he's doing. We're all enjoying watching it. But for
Yeah.
most people, it's too restrictive. And that goes
Yeah.
into saying, like, even going gluten and dairy free for me, it could be like comparable to Brian Johnson in a way. Like, it is something that's good for me that maybe some people wouldn't be able to do because they don't want to change their diet or it's too restrictive for them. But for me, I'm like cooking and I love it and I'm
Yeah.
experimenting and like Sirak's earlier talking about a cheeseburger hot dog, and I'm thinking, how can I make that for dinner tonight with the dairy-free cheddar in the
Can I
mix?
come over?
Like that's where my brain goes. Like that helps me thrive. So you have to find something that really works for you.
Yeah. And on the longevity point too, again, my own like learnings over the past, few years, I think that again, I mentioned it earlier, like we are to be stewards of our bodies, but a verse that's really given me comfort is that the Bible says like in your book, like all of our days were written before even one came to be, right? Meaning that like there's nothing that we can actually do to extend our days here on earth. Like we all have a time. And I
Mm.
think that also takes a lot of the pressure off of ourselves to be like, I'm going to live to 120 and do all these crazy things just to, get to that age. Because like at the end of the day, it's like, A, that's a lot of pressure, but B, that's not in your control. Right.
Mhm.
And like in the health space too, I mean, people who are scared to go out to eat. What's that term where it's like you're scared of what you eat? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
There's like
I
a
know the
certain
term, but I
term.
know I know exactly what you mean. I don't know the term though.
I don't
It'll
know
come
the
to me.
term.
But people, yeah, it'll come to me after this podcast ends. I'll
Yeah.
be like, that was the word. But yeah, people are like scared. And I was at this point too, where it's like I didn't want to go out to dinner with friends because I was concerned about the canola oil or like,
Yeah.
whatever the restaurant was using. And I think there's a fine line, right, between like eating healthy, but also if it's at the sacrifice of spending time with your friends and that social, component that we need to thrive, like then it's not healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's balance,
Balance.
Well,
Yeah.
orthorexia. That's it.
Yeah. Where
Yeah.
you want to eat super clean all the
Yes.
time, no matter what. Everything has to be
Yeah.
organic,
And
pesticide.
I for sure had that in my initial stage of trying to be super healthy, like 10 years ago or
Really?
whatever. Like when I was trying to be super healthy, I would be like really strict to the point where I wouldn't eat certain stuff with people or yeah, for sure.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But
And
I
it's
didn't
just
get
like
down to the point where it was like unhealthy. It
stressful.
was just like for some time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So fine line.
Is
But
that why you married a dietitian?
I did.
Because we met like 8 years ago.
I made a big
Around that
investment. I took you out to 50 dinners. I will pay for all of them because I
Oh my
want to make
God.
that investment
Oh my
for
God.
these free dinners
paid
that I
off.
get now. That's right, everybody. That was the
paid off.
You know
Colleen,
what?
what do you do for like ice cream though? Like that's something I struggle with. So again, like I don't really have dairy as part of my diet, but ice cream is my Achilles heel. Like I love ice cream. And I know there's like this so delicious, like
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
what we
there's
usually get.
That's what I
alternatives.
do. Yeah. The
But, like what about when you
alternative-
go out and there's like really good
Yeah.
ice cream flavors and you're like,
gelato.
Well, like when you go out, there's so many like gelato places now, or like a lot of like ice cream spots that are really good. I mean, you should
Yeah.
answer.
Bacio de latte is delicious. I don't know if you have that
Ooh.
there. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I've heard of
delicious.
them.
Yeah. But they have great sorbets and like gelatos that
Okay.
don't have dairy in it. And then yeah, I know what you mean. Like I look at the other flavors, they're so much better. They're like chocolatey Nutella, whatever.
I know.
So I
There
make
was-
Sirak get the flavor I like, and then I have one bite.
I would have no control. There was this just reminded me. I studied abroad in Florence, Italy when I was a junior in college. You did too?
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh, that's wild. I went, spring of 2016. I haven't been to Europe since. I really want to go back. But I mean, obviously, when you're in Italy, right? Like you're gonna eat gelatos. Like there's this gelato festival that they would do like every year. And I remember I went and I just like taste tested like every single truck that was there.
Nice.
And then there was also this like gelato place near the apartment I lived that I would frequent every single day. And then the last day of my Italian class, our teacher takes us to this like shop and my whole class walks in and the owner of the store like sees me and he's like, "Ciao, Bella." And I was like, and they were like, "How do you know him?" And I was
Oh
just
my
like,
God.
The
don't
top
look at me.
customer.
You're like
But
every
I had
day.
That's
so
so
much,
funny.
literally every day, but it was worth it.
What
You're
city
like
was it?
walking
Was it
credit.
Florence?
Florence, yeah.
Did you see that sandwich shop, the famous sandwich shop that has like 50 people out the line?
Probably, yep. I probably waited in that line many a time.
Right,
You
yeah,
have to.
Yeah.
I gained
That's
so
something.
much
That's
weight.
something even Italian tried. Did they have gluten-free bread or just
No.
having like the?
I ate
No.
gluten back then. I was like, I knew I shouldn't, but then I was eating a little bit. But it was Italy. I don't remember being super inflamed. I didn't have acne when I
Yeah,
studied
That's what
abroad.
they
Like
say.
it was different.
Yeah. We'll have to go back together and we could just eat all the gluten.
100%.
Didn't we go a couple years ago?
Yeah, we went
Yeah.
back to Florence
Mhm.
on our
Oh.
honeymoon time.
So
No,
nice.
when we were traveling the world.
No, we didn't go to Florence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
We didn't go to Florence.
Florenza.
We never go
went to-
back to
we went
places
to
we
Milan.
went. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
You need to go to Florence.
yeah.
Go
I mean,
back.
We went.
do you go back to places you've traveled to?
Honestly, it's a good question. I'm a creature of habit. Like if it comes to like a beach, right? Like on the East
Yeah.
Coast, there's like one beach that I love that I will like repeatedly want to go to. When it comes to like places outside the US, I feel like there's so many on my list that I
Yeah.
like don't want to like repeat the same ones I've already done. I really want to go to
Same.
Paris. Paris is on my list.
Oh,
yeah.
you need
We
to
just
go.
I need to
went, like,
go.
4 months
Really?
ago.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Can
And
you like
it's-
make me an itinerary?
Yeah, I'll
Oh,
forward
yeah,
you
yeah.
the one I have on Canva.
yeah,
Perfect.
Shit.
Beautiful.
I
Oh,
made
great.
a 10-day itinerary and it includes Bordeaux. So
Mhm.
if you like wine country and just like,
Oh,
seeing that
so
first,
nice.
highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let
I
me
love
know and I'll
that.
forward it to you.
Yeah.
Perfect. I love that.
That and Switzerland are like the best. I love Switzerland too.
Yeah.
It's the best place.
You guys have been like everywhere.
We
I mean,
went everywhere, yeah.
we traveled for I don't know if you know this, but about 3 years ago we had an apartment and we basically just sold everything and closed down, not closed down, we just sold everything, packed everything up and
No.
traveled across the world basically. When I say across the
That's
world, we just mean, like,
amazing.
Europe for like a
I
whole
mean,
year.
that's like
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
That's, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I went to Barcelona, Switzerland, London, Scotland. I mean, a bunch of
Wow.
countries that I'm forgetting a bunch, but yeah, we did that just to kind of because we
for
realized, like,
you.
we had this like amazing,
Online, like,
with this
career.
online community.
Yeah.
You don't really
Take
need to
advantage.
save. Yeah, exactly. And we're like, if we buy a place now, it's like, okay, we're stuck. That's it. We can't like do anything anymore.
That
Okay.
was so smart.
Yeah,
so
before we
smart.
have kids, all that kind of stuff. Let's
Yeah.
travel for a year. So that's kind of
yeah.
I love that. The dream. I know that's kind of the position I'm in right now because it's like, I mean, I need to like have my space to like create content and like do my podcast, but really, like I don't actually have to be tied to one place right now. So
Yeah.
that's true.
I'm
Yeah,
still
that's
getting
true.
my groove though. But I
Yeah.
love that you did that. That's awesome.
And it's a lot like cheaper than you think because you can like there's so many if depending on what you want to do, there's so many different ways to do it. Like you can go like what we did, which was like find like really affordable like Airbnbs, sharing
Yeah.
spots, things like that.
Blue
So that
Ground.
way,
You should look into
yeah,
Blue Ground. They have like
yeah.
really cool like furnished vacation rentals.
Oh
I've
yeah,
been
yeah, exactly.
looking. I've been
Yeah,
looking.
Do it.
yeah. Do it honestly. When you have the chance, do it, or else later it might be a lot harder.
Yeah.
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 Amazing. Well, I think that's a great place to close this podcast interview on. We talked about travel right now. For anybody who's thinking about travel, do it. Is honestly the best way to get your mindset right before, I guess before spring.
Yeah.
It's true. That is true.
Amazing.
I
So
also find that like I thrive with PCOS when I travel for some reason. It might be the opposite for other people because it's so like, you can't find the foods that you're used to or whatever. But for some reason, the walking
oh yeah.
and the reduced
Yeah.
cortisol, because it's always like a fun adventure. And
Yeah.
like there's like certain components of traveling that makes me thrive so much, especially in the summer. So if you're really struggling with PCOS, maybe that's the trick. Get
The
your
trip.
mind off of things.
That could be a good next like content piece for you.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Too much now. That was a dog.
PCOS getaway.
Cool. So thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for joining today's episode. I highly recommend everybody check out Jacqueline's podcast as well as her blog. Where can they find both of those? I want to make sure everyone subscribes today.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you both so much. This has been so fun. Again, I'm not used to sitting on the opposite side of the camera, so I got to do this more often.
Yes.
But folks can so my blog is wellandstrong.com. That's the letter N, strong.com. My social handles are all on there. My Instagram, well.n.strong. It's funny, I don't love social media, but I do create a lot of content on there, so definitely check it out. And then, yeah, my podcast is How to Be Well and Strong. It'll be 2 years old this May. Try to, diversify the topics there, but it's been so fun. So yeah, folks could check that out. That'd be awesome.
Yes.
Sounds great.
We will link all that in the description as well. So you can just head over there directly. And we're also on Jacqueline's podcast as well. So we'll link that there as well. So you can go ahead and listen to that episode. Thank you again for joining, and we look forward to next time.
Talk to you soon.